I'm back in the studio. I've got the painting up here, and down here I've laid out the pastels. I've added a few in since I was up at the studio, the Colour Circle studio. I've still got the Richard McKinleys and the Australian Earths, but I've added in one tray of my Mungo handmade galleries because they've got a lot of really good earth colours in them, so I thought I'd lay that out as well since I'm home and I've got a lot of room. Also some Derwent pastel pencils just for tidying up some edges, and the Contes over there. I've fairly much done the sky, and I'm starting on these shapes here, so I'll be keeping working that way, and we'll work forward into the foreground, which will go in last of all. I'm trying to get in these dark shapes now, and I'm going to use some of the Mungos for that as well, because they've got a good range of darks that are slightly harder than the Richard McKinley. So I'm putting in some purples in here. It's not exactly purple in my photograph, but photographs lie. They don't show you the whole colour gamut. And I want to put in some purples because there'll be a nice contrast to all the oranges and yellows and just make it a more interesting painting. So just mixing a few of those purples in there. There's a nice big shadow coming down here too. I'm using the side of the pastel just to describe some of these shapes. That one has a nice bit of shadow coming down there. And now I'm just scrumbling in some various colours in the darker range there. Over here there are some fissures and cracks that are quite dark, but this area is quite light really. So a few areas with a little bit of shadow in them, but mostly it's fairly light. So I'm just adding a little bit of warmth in those shadowed areas just to break up all the yellows. And a little in there. And then I need to build up the arch a bit more. So that will just be done in some fairly controlled linear way here, because with the tips of my pastels, because it's such a delicate area. I don't want to lay down too much too quickly because I want to be able to go in and add in some more colour. And this side is much lighter than the other, so I'm using the lighter colours over here and taking them out and extending them out into the main rock mass there as well. And just keeping going back and forth, looking at all the shapes and the values as I'm working to try and get it the way I want it. So I want it to fairly accurately resemble the shape of this arch. The rocks around it I'm not so finicky about, because the whole subject of this focus of this painting is the arch. I know the rocks around it need to be fairly well as they are, but not as much as that arch does. So just keeping running my pastels over there, and it will drag some of the colour from underneath. One thing I missed earlier on is that this area here is sky, and I really need to put that in before I work on the arch anymore, or I'm going to have real difficulties. So just putting that area of sky in. This is too blue. That's what happens when you move locations and 2 days later start getting back into it. You've forgotten which pastels you use, which is why I often keep them in a separate little container. But my class arrived earlier than expected because it was the last day and they were all excited to get there, so I just quickly packed up and didn't do it as efficiently as I normally would. So I'm laying in a little bit of that cloud colour, continuing it from up above there, in the lighter sort of yellowy colour, and then a little bit of the pale pinky colour. So now I've fixed that little area there. I can go in with a pencil at this stage if I want to and just sharpen those edges up, which I might do just so I've got a very sharp edge in the corner there. Makes a nice fine crack going back there. And then it's quite dark coming down here, so I need to fix that as well. So as I said, it's just watching the shapes and modifying them as you go, looking for what's there. Maybe that needs to come down a little further. Yeah, if that's better. So the rocks are all about shapes, especially the arch, and I can see already that I've made a mistake with that arch. That's okay, as long as I've noticed it now. The point here should be further over that way, so I'm just going to drag it back like that, my clouds. Flatten it out slightly there. And this is very thin, so I'm just thinning that down a little bit. It's really thin and delicate. And I'll pull the clouds up as I go there. So I'm trying to move the point of the arch. It's much thicker there and the point comes probably more around like that. And then to make this even more delicate, it undercuts in a little bit there. So I'll just bring the shadow up and around. You can see you've got a fatter area there of shadow. It's still not delicate enough. And now I'm cutting back in with just a white here. In fact, what I might do for that area is just dust it out with a little brush. Not quite hard enough. And kind of sculpt out the shape a little bit. To make it slightly thinner and more delicate. And now I'll need to go back in with the sky colours and just fix that up. So it's best for me to get that sorted at this stage because it is the main thrust of the painting. So I don't mind that I'm running it down into the arch because then I'll go back in and tidy up the arch edges again. So a bit of that and then a bit more of the blue. And I'm pulling it down into the arch there to modify it, and then I'm wiping it so it doesn't drag the arch colour back up into the sky. And just adding a little bit more soft cloud over there. It's gone very pink there. I've got it too pink in comparison to everything else. So I'm just putting some blue back over it so it doesn't look too pink. So it's just a regular check between what you're seeing and what you're painting to try and get a good balance. So now I've sculpted back into that and I need to sharpen up the edges again I'm just picking up a pastel pencil and just running it back down there. To get that right. That probably should go up a bit higher. When it's such a complex shape, it does require a bit of adjustment, and you can see I've made that too pointy up the top. And that should be thicker going up there, so here I go, modifying that as well. And the hard pastel pencil pushes and blends everything underneath it, and then I'm going to go over it with a bit of the softer pastel to get back the more textured effect. The arch is looking more like the arch now. Very dark pastel here now. Just taking in and putting in those little cracks. There's a fine crack coming down here. Normally I would do this towards the end, but at the moment I just want to make sure I've got the arch all sorted. I've made the sky hole slightly bigger than it really is in life, just because I wanted to emphasise the arch, so that's why it's like that. So you don't always have to stick it rigidly to what you're seeing. I'm just pretending I'm looking at it at a slightly different angle. Not 100% happy with the arch yet, but it will come along as I go. The basic shape's in, and I can adjust it as I go. It's just making that ever so thin up there. And it's quite thin when it gets back there too. So now I'm going to model that in again, sculpt that in a little bit with one of the mungos. Put in some of the other rocks that are coming down there. And add in, it's coming off there and coming across. Just going back, looking at those shapes, and then blocking them in the direction that the rocks are forming. So just pulling some little streaks of colour down through there, and looking at the various colour and values that I have there. Just working back through the painting. Quite light out the back there. I need to make it match up with the background there. I can't have the background rock not meeting the foreground one underneath that arch, or it will just look strange. So this rock is curving around. So you can see I'm just taking my pastel and curving it around, like so, to get the top of that rock and the curve as it goes through the window there. And then it will get darker as it comes down there. So I'll pull out a darker pastel and just use the side of that to bring it down. It really needs to be darker than that too, So I'm going to move into a few purple colours there, those shadow areas. And this one comes up and around. That's got a little bit more. I'm making that slightly bigger than I originally did because there's another delicate piece of rock on top of it there. And again, I'll be mixing up those colours. I want this one to be very dark in here, in places, so I'm using some of the really dark colours from the Richard McKinley box. And it comes around to sort of there. And I've actually got it going too far on this one. I've carved out a wee bit too much. It should come more down here. So that is going to have a little bit of moderation as I move back there. I'll be adding in a few bluey greys as well to some of these rock areas. The blue will help nicely contrast with the yellows and contribute to the shadows and that sort of grey texture and colour that you get in rocks. So I'm adding some of that in, a little bit here on the lighter side, coming down here, just pulling it across to sort of make random shapes, a little bit of it coming down through here, and using the flat side of it. Because if it's all just orange and ochres, it's going to get a little bit boring, so I want to add a little bit of this into the mix as I'm going. And as it comes around over the top of that one, I'll scrumble in a bit of the blues. A little bit down that side, into the shadows, a few bits of the blue in these darker shadows, not much, but a little bit. And you can see how well the blues work against those orangey colours. Some of that will go in here behind. Sorry, the sage at the foreground, so I'm just blocking in a few bits of rocks there. I'm feeling that's catching my eye too much, so I think I'm going to, while I'm noticing it, add a bit more blue into it, so it's not quite so light there. Pull the blue up through here as well, and then just give it a little bit of a swoosh with my finger to blend it in a little bit. And it's just knocked it back enough so it's not so bright on the eye. I do know I'm going to need to sharpen that up again and sharpening up the edges here, but right now I'm just working on getting some texture into the rocks and getting the shadow areas in and sculpting those rocks a bit. I'll add in some darker browner colours here. I'm doing this with a Conte because it's got some little sharper edges. And I can pick up the rim of the and again, this is just adding in some variation into those rocks. Using a sharper one, sorry, the harder one, is making a lot of that very soft pastel fall off, and I'll be going back and putting a bit more over that. I just wanted to add in a little bit of some darker browns with this one. I'm putting a little shadow bit there in between, behind the where the arch comes out, and rounds up a bit here into the main rock. And trying to get some of those little shapes in as markers to remind me how it's going to go. This is all very dark in here, and I'm going to go back to my purples again. So really, I'm pushing and pulling between the oranges, blues, purples and yellows, getting a nice interplay of colours there. I'm still working with the harder pastels from, I'm putting some quite light bits back here. So these are the harder ones from the mungos. I'm just adding some little touches of light in there on some of these rocks with the light value, and where the light's catching in here, just put a couple of those in. I don't want too much of this, it's just a little bit in a few spots, a little bit across the top of here where it catches just on the, and it's not a continuous drag, it's just a drag and lift, a little bit coming through there. And you could pull a little bit of it down into the shadows there where some edges of the rock are being a little bit sunlit there. So I've got some nice sunlit edges there, and just this little rock down here is going to have a little bit of a sunlit edge there too. So just looking at the value shifts there, it's that very dark bit there that delineates the arch there, and that's looking reasonable. I'm going to change that slightly up there because it's too dish-like. I want to just make it a little bit more irregular. I don't want it quite so smooth. So I'm just adding a little bit of different shape into that. I need more work on the rocks down here, these foreground rocks, so I'm just pulling and scrumbling over the top of the colours I've already got there to give it a bit of rock-like texture. There's a nice light one coming up here, so that one's going in now, and it's got quite a sharp edge there. So let's put in the sharp edge. Those colours are working back into some of the rocks here. Which are down at the base of the and I'm dragging them again from the lighter colours down over some of that shadowed blue, and again that's just increasing the texture. Go back in here and pull some of it down here for some lighter textured areas. And close to those highlights I put in there. And just keep looking back at the reference to make sure that you've got the idea of it and those relative shapes, because it's all about the relative shapes. Up here I'm going to start sculpting in some of those little sort of hatty rocks that are sitting up there. That is actually more part of that, and that needs some big shadowed area there. So I'm going to go back in and give it some shadow down here. And make some little marks across here for some little cracks, and then these little hatty bits of rock, that's what I'm calling them. And there's another one over here, so just putting in a bit of shadow there. And the rock sits on top. That's the shadow part of the rock, and then there's sort of a rock cap over the shadows there. So putting those in, and just putting some down into the shadows there. So the rocks are starting to get that little sculptured look about them. They just need continual work on all those different areas. So I'm doing a bit of squinting now and seeing if I've got the dark areas dark enough. So that's dark enough, but this area here isn't really dark enough. So I know I have to go back in and darken that all up. And I'll be going into the Richard McKinley box and pulling out my very dark in there, and that's just going to, I'll just be checking back into here and seeing where I need to put those darks, those really darks, and building up a little bit of dark work around there. So it comes around here, comes down in front of that, which is why it looks so light there. And actually it does come over further there, so I'll just bring it right over there. So as I've been saying, you need to just keep looking at your shapes and working out where they go in relation to the other shapes, and that's how you'll make it look realistic. So there's a nice dark edge going around this bit of rock down here, and another very dark edge down here, which lightens up as it comes up. So just pulling that up into sharp edge down there with the long flat sharp edge, and then pulling it up into the base of that rock. Really dark in here and around that shadow bit there. It's kind of the area where that rock's leaning up against the other rock, and then it's quite dark here. There's a little rock sitting on top there with a shadowed area, and then that little area there is quite shadowed, so just pull that in and add a little bit of darks down here. I don't want too much detail over this side because it's going to pull your eye too far out of the painting. So I'm trying to keep some texture in there but not too. And here I'm just going to slide the sharp edge of the pastel along a few passages there, a few areas just to get some deeper, darker shadows going in. A little shadow coming down through here around this rock that's quite dark as well. Almost as dark as the shadow underneath the arch. So that's what I'm doing, just comparing the shadows to each other. Not so dark back in here. There's one area that's quite dark around there, around the end of that rock. Coming down into there. And there'll be some dark little patches around here where these little rocks are sitting in shadowed areas. So I'm just putting some of those in randomly because I don't want to sort of spend too much time on that area. Over here in this rock, there's a couple of little cracks and so on it that's quite dark. And then there's going to be a dark area coming up right down there, shadowed area. So all that's going in. And we've got a lot more now sculpting going on. Up here it's fairly dark too, so I'll put a little bit of the dark in there and down underneath this very light patch. A little bit up in there. If I think they're too dark, I can go back and modify them later, and you know I probably will do some of that. But right now I'm just trying to get those shapes sorted out. I can come up there a little bit more too. This rock, this isn't quite right here, and I know what it is. So keep looking and you'll work out what it is. This is too far forward and too round. It needs a straighter edge there. So I'm going back in with one of the Australian earth colours and just straightening up the edge of that rock with a nice sharp edge there. It's much flatter than I've made it. And then it rounds off at the top there. And the little hatty rock sits on top, like so. Kind of straightening them both there. So I now need to add the shadow in underneath that rock and down so, just like so. Off the edge of the rock to make it sit on this rock. And I want to keep that a bit darker and not detracting from I just want it to fade out a bit over there, so I'm not going to put much detail in it. Adding a few darker colours there. So I'm going back and checking this now and seeing if there's anything else I need to vary there. I think that needs to come down maybe a little bit straighter. So I'm going to take my very dark again and just make that rock come down a little bit straighter and have a few more angles on it. Be a little bit more angular than I had it. I'll pull those back into there. And there's a lot more shadow than I've shown on this rock here, so I'm just going to put in a much larger shadowed area there. add in some blues to that, because the blues are quite effective. That bluey grey is going to get added in there towards the back there, a little bit down into the shadows. So I want to give the edges a little bit of crispness, but as they go into the shadows, you kind of lose that a bit. So it's where the light is playing against the darks that you see the crispness a bit more. A little bit of blues going back into those shadowed areas, and a bit more of that blue coming across there. Adding in some more of these grey blues over here in some little odd spots for bits of suggestions of shadows. Up along here it needs a few dark spots going in of little shadowy cracks and so on. So I'm putting some of those in now. We don't want it to be a solid light colour there, so a few little cracks going in there and a few more coming down here. It's a little bit greyer around there. Time to stand back and have a look at it from a bit more distance and see what else I need to do. I might add a little bit of some reds into these shadowed areas too. I've got a very dark purpley red, and so I'm going to add some of that in, just to vary it up a bit. Keep those shadows interesting, but still quite dark. I've decided to knock that back a little bit because I don't want this rock competing with some of the other areas. A little bit of the much darker colour coming down here for shadow onto that rock. And that still needs quite a bit more shadow than I've given it. I'm going to tighten up some of the lines there now with a pastel pencil. just the little edges of the cracks and the shape here. And if I want to make that a little bit more blended, just running the pastel pencil over it will blend it quite well too. And that's what I'm just doing here, blending. Oh, don't watch me do that, I should never do that. So I'm just blending some of those shadow colours in a little bit, using the pencil. And sharpening up the edges. I want it to be really sharp against the sky there. So as I was said in one of the recent tips on Patreon, using a coloured pencil, if you don't have a pastel pencil, can work really well too. They don't deposit much colour, but they're very good at blending, and they can, around the edges, they can give you really crisp edges. So here I'm just working some of those edges, doing a little bit of blending with that. A little bit of drawing with this to just add a little something into the shadows. And I want to get all this sorted before I start down in the foreground here, because once I've started down there I don't want to have to keep going back and risk damaging the areas I've sorted out. So just adding a bit of blue into that now with an indigo pencil, just to. And as I'm doing that, I'm constantly checking the shapes, and I can see that I should have a few highlights on there, so I'll add a few of those on in a minute. But just in the meantime, bluing off a couple of those areas, and in the little rock down here, which does need a bit of modelling there. So the pencils are quite good at knocking back areas and modelling them a bit for you as well. A little bit of cross-hatching in the pencil there, just to tie some of the areas together. I'm going to actually look for a different pencil now. I'm going to put the pencils away and add in a little bit of some other colours into here, just a few in the various shapes. A little bit of purples in there. That area needs to be modelled a bit more, and that one does too, down into the shadows. Just lighten that off a bit as it comes down out of it. And I'm going to add some of that colour, the already orange colour, back into here. So I can have some reds as well as the yellows and oranges. So they're all earth colours, so they're not bright high chroma, but they have a lot of interest in them, and they're beautiful subtle colour. So I haven't pulled out any oranges. It's all these lovely earth colours. Over here it needs a bit of that warm colour running through the shadows as well. Down here for the little lip on the shadow, I'm introducing some of that. And you can see how adding in the warms to the shadows really sparks them up a bit. Down on these rocks, they're getting a little bit of that warm colour. You can just see peaks of rocks coming through there. Little touch on the edge of that rock. Maybe 1 or 2 touches up here. And I'm really building up the colours now. You can see that there's a lot of variety within the rock face of colour and texture, and that's exactly what I want. Down in here, there's a little bit of this red coming into to these shadow areas. So just pop a little bit of that in. Maybe a little touch of it in this rock as well. So now I'm just searching out the little variations in the rocks. Any little things I should have noticed earlier. Describing just ever so mildly. Just suggestions of rocks at the base there. They're all kind of scrumbled up together here, so I'm just putting in those suggestions of rocks there. As I stand back and look at it, I'm judging the colours, the values and the shapes, and I'm thinking that this needs a little bit more blue here. Look at that blue-grey just on that shadowed side. So I'm going to pull some of that around, which will just make the arch look a little bit more delicate there, with a bit of shadowing underneath it. And I do know I need to put a little bit more of that red in over here as well on the end of this one. And it just brings the area to life when you put a bit of the wall next to those cool shadows. without sort of jumping out and smacking you in the face, which we don't want. I'm feeling this needs a little bit more work over here, so I'm going to touch up some more bits of light areas over some of those rocky forms there, and a little bit more dark area in behind it. So I don't think I've been quite firm enough with some of these little cracks, and I need to add in a bit more shadow there than I have, possibly. Adding some little cracks up there. Some more deeper darks down around this area. So I'm going to go back with my very dark now and add in a few more. So I'm just piling in some little shadowed areas to delineate some of these rocky areas here. Not too many, I don't want it to be too drastic, but I do want to have a few darker marks over in that area as well. Just a few. And then make that one a little bit darker as well. So kind of a soft dark. I'm not pressing as hard. I'm not depositing as much of the dark there. So it gives it the shadow, but not as dark. Whereas over here I do want it to be dark, so I'm just adding some more of that in. And down here I want to just sharpen that up slightly. And push up a little bit of the shadows into the base of that rock. Stepping back, having a look, I'm fairly happy that I've got the darks now as I want them. Could be maybe a little darker in one of those areas, and it's something I might have a look at later. I like this area because it's doing what I wanted to do. It's standing out that shadow underneath the actual arch there.